Welcome to this week's Endurance for Everyone podcast.
The following program is for entertainment purposes only. Though the hosts of this show are certified Ironman coaches, their attempts at long-course triathlons and endurance events should not be taken as an endorsement for you to do something stupid too. You should make your own bad decisions, then podcast about it. Now, let's start the show.
Hey, this is John Harris.
And this is Rob Bozovich.
And Endurance is for Everyone, and this is the Endurance for Everyone podcast.
Hey guys, it's Rob again. We're doing another one of our Ultra August episodes. On the other line, I already have SEAN MEEHAN. We had him on, and I was talking to him just a little bit pre-roll here, and it seemed like I just talked to him like yesterday, and we were discussing the Laurel Highlands Ultra and so forth. And then I really sat back and realized that's been almost 9 months ago that we had that conversation. So some of the questions we may have answered back then, but like I said, we're gonna hit him again and do another whole-blown interview with some targeted things. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and just say, hey, SEAN, welcome back on the show. How you been? What's been going on?
Hey, Rob, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be back. Things have been pretty good, man. I think last time when we talked about Laurel Highlands, I had been dealing with some hernia stuff, and I had surgery on that and was recovering from that. Been up and down in the training cycle with that. And other than that, things have been progressing positively, and I'm scheduled to run a 100-mile here in September and maybe another one in November, depending on how everything works out with this 100 in September. So things are good.
What one are you leading into here? What 100-mile do you have coming up?
I'm running Run Rabbit Run 100, which is in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. So it's 100. I think it's actually like 102 miles now. They did some rerouting on the course, made it more trail versus dirt road type stuff, and the course is pretty much all above 8,000 feet, which where I live in Connecticut, and from where you live in Pennsylvania, is not something that we are used to training in. So
not even a little bit.
Yeah, it should be quite an experience. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. So what when you say you're okay? So you went through your hernia and hernia and recovery and so forth. What kind of mileage are you putting in? And when I say it this way, with your when you're convalescing there, were you like completely not running whatsoever? Like what's the year been like for you?
The year's been it's been a down year mileage wise, right? So I've had ups and downs. I would start to feel better, and then something else would pop up. And I think a lot of it that equates to not just trying to get into running and not being injured, right? I think there's a certain stigma that comes with being injured, like, oh no, like you're injured. How can you be injured? Like your personality, your persona is this like runner person, and then like you're not doing it. So you kind of, it's hard to pull back from that. So I think a little bit of that stemmed from me trying to go too hard too early. And then the other thing that I think that happens is, right, so you have this major, it's a minor orthoscopic surgery, but when it comes into your pelvis area and like your abdominals, and then I had a skiing accident that compounded some issues. And so I had a lot of damage on the right side of my pelvis, and that just alters the gait just a little bit. Right. So when you alter that gait just a little bit, and your body's trying to refigure out how this all functions together, and you start adding miles upon miles and start adding speed work in there, things that weren't problems before have like kind of started to become problems. And I've, worked through them and, had to back off mileage, had to take time off. But as far as overall mileage, I think right now overall mileage for the year is around maybe 800 miles, which is pretty low for me. Recently in the past 6, 7, 8 weeks, like I said, I'm getting ready to run, rabbit, run. I've been ramping on mileage pretty consistently and been pretty consistent in my mileage. And I'm up around I'm hanging in the 60s right now, mid 60s. I'll be up probably towards a couple weeks at just about 70 prior to tapering everything off.
Cool. I was just going to ask that. And I was actually looking at my training plan to see where I'm at, because I'm following the Hanson's plan again. And so real quick, 10, 20, 36. Yeah, I'm probably in the mid 50s right now, and 8 weeks out on the Hansen plan. And that was going to be my one question to you. And I haven't, and we'll get down into it later, because this is all going to be ultra but a little sporadic in where it goes. I do get the list of questions we'll get to eventually. But what's been, when I say your experience with the mileage and or the difference in the distance, I should say, from, when I say a marathon to the ultra. Now, I guess I'll concede that I'm doing a much heavier training plan. Like, I know previous training plans I've done have been in the 30 miles per week. Most of that coming from the long run on the weekend. 3-4-3 during the week, and then a longer on the weekend in order to get the majority of the mileage built up and so forth. What's the main difference with an ultra training plan that you've seen versus a marathon, time wise or distance wise?
Well, it's that's interesting. So I equate, and I tell people this, that training for say 100K, 100 miler, distance wise, the average person's probably not going to put in too many more miles than, say, someone that's training for a very hard marathon, right? Like I said, like I'm a decent ultra runner and decent 100 miler, and I top out like around 75, 80 miles. I just, as not being a professional, I don't have enough time to do split runs 2 times a day, and like I have a life, and right. So I think most people can kind of figure somewhere in between the 50 and the 70 mile range is probably pretty comparable, and that's, I think, what you come into when you look into doing training for a hard marathon.
Yeah, I guess I consider myself when I say average, I'm gonna say average, and some people in the group might say, hell no, you're way better, but I know I'm not a sub 25K guy. To me, that's the better than average. I'm average, with about, let's say, a 24-minute 5K when I'm just racing that, 21 to 24, depending on how trained I am, right? But I noticed that, what would take me a lot longer, and I won't throw him under the bus necessarily, but, John is a much slower pace than I am. So when he puts a 10 mile on the calendar, that's going to be every bit of maybe a 2-hour or longer run for him to do. But I look at like an easy recovery or an easy paced 10 miler on the weekend, and then I'm talking it's an hour 30 to an hour 40 minutes, which 20 minutes difference between an hour 40 and a 2 hour doesn't seem like the biggest thing. But hey, if I'm running short on time, I can quickly get dressed, be out the door, be back in and done, like I said, an hour and a half if I pick the pace up. But if I'm going more leisurely with friends, hour 40, it's not killing as much of your day, especially doing this training plan, I guess, with a lot more work. I guess I feel, when I say more prepared, I remember my first half marathon training plan, where when I went and would do my first 10 miler, and I was wiped for the entire day. I didn't do anything else the rest of the day, but hey, I went and did a 10 miler and then helped friends move on Saturday. So I guess it's just a different ball game because of the volume.
It's volume, and I think consistency goes a long way. You've been training pretty consistently, like straight through your, up into your marathon and straight through your marathon. And I think when it comes to running, consistency goes a long, long way. I think running 5 consistent days a week is excellent. For me, I would rather run shorter, like my total volume be the same, and run 6 days a week, then run super long on a weekend, or 2 super long runs on a weekend and 2 like short runs in the midweek. A more consistent pace for me. I don't really top out much more than 22, 24 miles on a long run. I don't think you gain much over that on like more than 20 miles.
And now to put
I
that
think
in perspective, because we're talking ultra distance and you're talking 22-mile long run for a 100-mile race, I'm assuming, right? Or
yeah,
100K, because once again, my long run on the Hansen plan is 16 miles for a 26-mile race. So there's probably some guys in our group that are still sitting there. A long run to them might be 7 miles, and I want to just put that in perspective that you're talking 22 miles. You're talking essentially 22% of the overall distance, but with the cumulative mileage still increased through the week.
correct. And you're doing Hansen's plan, which Hansen generally has lower mile long runs, right? More quality runs
Yep.
and not worried about the distance. Whereas like if you look at like McDaniel, or if you look at Jack Daniels or Hal Higdon, right? Like it's a 20, 22 mile long run a
Right.
lot of times. That's
Yep.
where they peak out. And that's for a marathon training, right? So like it's like you said, it's not much different, but I'm doing 8 and 10 mile runs during the week, and then I'm doing a 20 with a back to back, maybe like 16.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's where it comes into getting used to running on tired legs and running where you're already depleted, because that's what you're going to find at the end of an ultra. That's where you're at.
Yeah.
So
Cool. Well, hey, I'll jump into one of our first questions here, and that is, in a sentence or two, what got you into ultras?
yeah, I think we covered this a little bit when we talked about Laurel Highlands, and I got into ultras because of essentially OCR, obstacle course racing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had moved up to got out of the Navy, moved up to Connecticut, new baby, my wife, and new house, new job, all these added stressors. Went from having essentially a active job to a desk job, and put on a ton of weight. I put on about 50 pounds in less than a year. With the new baby, the easiest thing to do was like to get out the door and to like run. And I hated running. But I had a friend that was into obstacle course racing back in 2010, when it was just becoming like a big thing. And she was like, "Why don't you come do this Tough Mudder with me?" And so I signed up for a Tough Mudder, and I instantly fell in love with every aspect of it. Like I fell in love with the competition. I fell in love with the camaraderie. I fell in love with the challenging of myself. And I've grown up in competitive sports, and so that added competition aspect to it made the running and made the training worthwhile. And then there was a race called the Death Race that was put on by essentially by the founders of Spartan Race, which is another obstacle course race company. And they and it's undisclosed amount of time, like undisclosed chores almost. I guess obstacles would be the best way. So you didn't know what was going to happen, so you had to be prepared for everything. And it could go from 18 hours up to 72 hours. And I got intrigued with that because it wasn't always necessarily like the strongest or the fastest or the most athletic that persevered in that situation. It was those that were willing to suffer, those that were mentally strong, those that had put in a well-rounded effort. And I became kind of obsessed with it. And I went into training for that. And so my focus went to longer, harder, more work. And that's how I ended up getting into doing my first ultra. And my first ultra was 50K at it was at a park. It was called Seth's Fat Ass 50K.
Okay.
And a Fat Ass 50K, if you're not familiar, is it's basically a almost no budget ultra marathon type event. They put it on.
Everything I remember, and this goes back to, and I don't feel bad saying it, that fat asses is what I remember seeing in Runner's World. They're more along the lines of a well organized group run than a race. It's a
Correct.
show up, have fun. Some might have some water. People might end up getting shirts at a different one because they like to look the same, but it's not ever. It's just whatever. Each one is whatever it is, right?
Correct. Yeah, and they're all put on. There's no. I mean, there's no. Generally, I've never seen one with like official timing. It's been, show up with like a stopwatch, and like that's when like the race starts, and then we know how you come in and you write your time down.
Right.
Right. And so that was the first one I did. It was 5K loops, in a park, 10 of them for a 50K. Yeah. And I actually, funny story is, I showed up to that race. It was about 40 minutes from my house, and I showed up without my sneakers.
So what'd you do? Did you go barefoot or did you go back? I don't remember that story.
No, so I don't know if I told you that story. So I drove back, and like I said, 40 minutes, and I showed up relatively early, and came back with my sneakers and started running. The cutoff I think was 8 hours, and I knew that my pace was fast enough that even if I lost an entire hour and a half, I would still be able to finish within the cutoff. Like I said, it's a low-key race. It was a fat-ass race, and I ran, and they just started my time when I showed up. Yeah. They're like, all right, your time starts now. And I was like, okay, cool.
You're like, all right, go. Cool. How many ultras have you done, or about how many years have you been doing it now?
I've been doing ultras since 2012. Like I said, that was the first one that I did.
So this is 6 years. This is 6 years in for you. I mean, how many? Even just rough guess. How many a year do you think you do?
Generally, a year I'll do 2 to 3 ultras. I don't race a ton because of family commitments and other commitments. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would love to, and I try to make the races that I do special, I guess. I know there's people that race out there, once a month, once every other week. I know there's people that probably race shorter distances every week. But I try and do bigger races, destination races and stuff like that, so that it's a full-on experience. So like I said, I probably raced 2 or 3 a year since I started. So somewhere in the range, I would guess, of, ultras 15, maybe 20.
Cool.
I can tell you that I've done 4 official 100-milers, the death race, which was 72 hours, 2 24-hour Tough Mudders, and then a handful of other smaller ultras in various distances.
Quite the pedigree. So compared to me, who I'm looking at doing like my first, putting the first notch on the trekking pole, or however you want to say it there. So much more illustrative career than I have thus far, with 7 marathons and handful of everything else. And you've done more. You do more in 2 years than I've done in a decade here. So,
just distance-wise, you've probably done more races than I have. I would be willing to guess. I mean, between the triathlons you do on a regular basis and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and even that's been cutting off. We all go through it, and John and I had covered it on one show where it seems like, I guess I would say natural progression, I would say, at least because it's what I've seen, so that's what I feel like it, and that is, I jump in, you do 1 or 2, like maybe the first year because you're just getting into it and you don't know what it is, and then year 2 or 3 seems to be, when I say inundated, like 6 or 8, you do like a whole bunch in 1 year, and maybe even more, maybe 10. Like you said, it seems like every month or every 2 or 3 weeks for the whole summer I'm doing something, and then it starts to taper off, and like you said, I started getting more targeted. Okay, like maybe I'll redo this race triathlon wise. I would go back and do a race because I enjoyed it and I liked the area, or it was kind of like a tradition. Most of them, though, it's like you said, I'm trying to find a new place to go, a new thing to do, especially for me. And like I said, marathon has been the biggest thing that I've taken on thus far. Now, like I said, dipping my toe and debating this ultra thing, and so all the marathons I've been looking to do have been as you're saying, a destination. I want to go somewhere. I want to do a new state. That even being said is like, hey, I've done I've done 3 in Pennsylvania. I did Pittsburgh twice. That's the only marathon I've repeated. But I did Erie and Pittsburgh, and I even didn't love doing the same state twice, because for me to put in 16 weeks worth of training, I want the payoff to be, that much more going somewhere, like, more of a sense of accomplishment, I guess. So like, I say this now, and maybe one day I will, but I don't really have a desire to go do Steamtown, Scranton or Philly, because I don't want to do another Pennsylvania race. I want to, I'd rather travel a little farther, and get Connecticut or Rhode Island or something like that. So I don't know, could just be me.
If you come up to Connecticut to race, let me know. You got a place to stay.
We'll see. Yeah, I definitely will let you know if and when that occurs. My wife is kind of kindly asked me to, maybe after the ultra here, take a little step back on some of the training stuff. So we'll see. We'll see what happens in the years to come. And I make no promises or decrees either direction. But if I'm coming your way, I will dang sure let you know that I'm coming that way. So,
I mean, you literally visited the farm down the street from my house last time you were through Connecticut.
Yes, and so that was and the side story, it, and everyone else doesn't, or knows a little bit, I guess. That was we were traveling up, and our eventual goal was Cape Cod is where we're ending. But that's when ended up doing the Catfish Try in Harrisburg. So it's very odd to say I went to just past your house via Harrisburg, on my way to Cape Cod when I swung through Boston. It's just a very weird route. But, we traveled, I did the race, and then we just kept traveling and stopping places in order. Every couple hours, little guy would sleep in the car, and he would wake up, and we'd find a park, and we'd hang out. And so we ended up, in the morning, I did the race in Harrisburg. We then went to Philly, and he went to the Please Touch Museum. Then he slept for a few hours, and we ended up in Greenwich, I think, Connecticut. We made it that far. And then we spent the night in New Haven. So the next day it was only an hour for, I guess, New Haven to right up the street from your house. That's what, when you put in kid-friendly things, you go to what comes up and try to catch their attention to, keep them happy. So had I planned that better, I would have thought of to reach out to you, but it was one of those like on the fly. It's what came up in Google. That's where we went, spent a little bit of time, and then he got tired and fell asleep in the car, and we were on our way to Boston. So it's just, the fun of traveling with a 13, 14-month-old at that time. So it was a lot of fun. So next time, if there is next time, with the backwards eggs sign on the barn. So anyone who is up that direction now knows roughly where you live if they Google that. So back to some ultra related stuff here. So as I keep saying, this is going to be my first venture into this whole, when I say ultra thing, and and that being said, is I wasn't looking for I guess my thought process, where you had even said it with the OCR and going farther, bigger, harder, and so forth, is I've done Erie Marathon, completely flat. It's on Prescow. There's like 26 feet of elevation change, right? So, and that was my first one, and I was like 270 pounds when I started training for it. So I was looking for, I don't want to say easy, but that's pretty much what fit the bill. And so looking at doing this whole, my first ultra, I wasn't looking for easy. I wasn't looking for, flat or loops. I was looking to make it an adventure. And that's what led me when I went through Google to find the Fire on the Mountain down in, Maryland there. And as such, knowing, like you said, geographically what it's like there, which is what it's like here, for me, which is pretty close to what, you're up there, what you're going through. What gear do you think is essential? And making the assumption like, okay, I'm going to have my GPS watch on. The trail is going to be marked. So I don't think I'm taking an extra GPS, because I don't think I'm going to get lost. I'm just going to hope for the best. But would you recommend trekking poles? Do you use a hydration vest or a belt? What gear is essential?
So it's funny. I listened to so Megan's podcast came out today as we're recording this. And and it's funny, I listened to hers, and my answer is really pretty much the same as hers. Like,
I haven't listened to hers yet, so you can fill me in.
so she basically said, like, and John was like, anything but like shoes, shirt, and like shorts, like what's essential? And really, like, that's what's essential. And it sounds so silly. Like I will tell you that a good pair of shoes goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, because your feet, they're gonna take a pounding, like no matter what you do. Know how your shoes fit going uphill, going downhill. Know how they work on wet surfaces, on dry surfaces. Know if they have enough padding, enough support, enough whatever. Know if they drain well. No, I mean, these are like the things that to me matter, like what's on my feet. And that goes a huge way, because everything about running centers on your feet first and foremost. It's going to take the most abuse out of anything. So a good pair of shoes, or a couple of good pairs of shoes, goes a long way. And as far as anything else really essentially breaks down to what will make you more comfortable so that it's easier to suffer longer. Because no matter what happens, there's going to be some form of suffering involved in doing an ultra. I mean, there's suffering involved in doing a marathon. So you want to make yourself as comfortable and as possible, knowing that there's going to be other things that are going to make you uncomfortable. So, I mean, for me, I like to know, the GPS watch is great. I like to have a long battery. I like to know what my pace is and stuff like that. I use it's variable. So I try and go with as little gear as humanly possible. I run really hot. I like to run as cool as possible. So I'll wear singlets a lot of times, and wearing a singlet, you can't really wear a pack. You get a lot of chafing. So I'll use handhelds in that case. If I do have a longer race where I'm going a longer distance between aid stations, I'll wear a pack. And it's really just about having anything that fits properly. It doesn't so much matter what it is. It's how everything fits. If everything can take the abuse, and it's not chafing you and making you more uncomfortable. That's kind of the biggest thing. But like I said, shoes are huge, man. That's why there's so many people that live in so many different specific camps. There's the people that only run in ultras. There's only people that run in Hokas. There's only people that run in Brooks, or whatever the case may be. And whatever works for you is what you should stick with, and like what you need to have. As far as trekking poles are dependent, I think, upon a combination of distance, whether you're comfortable using them, and how much uphill climbing you're going to be doing. So
Karen's answer, which will come out next week, and that was it Karen's? Actually, yeah, I think it was Karen's, and she said she doesn't use trekking poles. Okay, and I had interviewed the race director as well, Kevin, and we put his out the other week, and he basically had said along the lines of like, hey, not a lot of people use them. I know one guy, but you kind of what you just said. It's what you're used to and what you're doing. And this one guy, he said he's very efficient with them and has the space to use them. I only bring that up and ask because when I say it's a split, there's some people that I feel that are just like, oh no, definitely not. And there's some people like, oh yes, 100%. Because I feel like, and this is my ignorant, I just don't know. I haven't done one going out to do it. And I've done hiking, and I find them very great for hiking. But like once I get onto a nice flat section of hiking, I do find that I'm not using them. They are in my hand that I'm carrying them. And I don't quite know how much, and that'll go into my race strategy question there. And that is, my race strategy I'm thinking is pretty much going to be, probably walking or power hiking up the hill, go as fast as possibly safe downhill and run, obviously try to run the flats anywhere that I can run. And I don't even know if you think that's like a quote valid race strategy, you know what I mean? But that's kind of with the whole trekking pole thing. I'm thinking on the going uphill, they'd be really nice. I would not think about using them on the downhills, because that'd be more of a hindrance. I'd be carrying them there and carrying them on the flats. I just didn't know what your thoughts are or your experience, and I guess that wraps into the next question is, is that a valid race strategy? I mean, can it get much more detailed than that? Not being on the course, not knowing it, and being my first one.
No, that's like a good race strategy. My recommendation, honestly, and that being said, I bomb downhills. I'm a pretty strong downhill runner. I'm a pretty good technical downhill runner. I run with reckless abandon downhills. However, if you're not used to doing that and you don't spend a lot of time running downhill, steep downhill at a significant pace, it'll eat up your quads really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And so I recommend almost holding back a little bit, at least early on in the race, in that regard. And that's, as far as the climbing, like power hiking uphills, generally speaking, that's a significant energy savings. I've done runs where me and a buddy ran the entire way up. I think it's about 450 feet of gain over about a little over a quarter mile, and we've run the entire thing up, pretty steep grade, and then came back down, and then ran the flatter sections of it, power hiked the steeper sections of it, and timed the difference in it. And it was like, I think the total time over that quarter mile was like 45 seconds difference.
Mm-hmm.
But when we got up to the hill after power hiking and running combination, we weren't like totally gassed and winded. So it's and you do a lot of heart rate training, I think, so you understand that your heart rate's going to kind of dictate a little bit of how you, or at least your perceived effort, it's going to dictate how you run those hills or not run those hills.
Right. Yep.
And same with the flats, I think. Flats will come down to, a lot of it will come down to mental toughness, because you can almost always shuffle a flat.
Yeah.
It's just whether you want to at that point or not.
Yeah. And I haven't, it's odd to say, and I think I've shared, and that is, I guess I'm technically in ultra training, but I'm really in marathon training, and it's the Hansons. So it's been some interesting changes even as of late, and I feel not like feeling like, oh, I know better, and like I don't, I'm not saying that, but I feel like I'm doing some things that are going to be good for, honestly, I can't really serve two masters. Off-road trail running for the ultra is a lot different than tempo, speed work for Chicago. And Chicago should be a fast, flat, although hot course. The ultra is a month later, but it's also it's gonna be off-road. So what I'm trying to, my balance, I guess so to say, is I've been running. Obviously, I've been doing my easy runs as Hanson's dictates, easy, and then I've been doing my hard runs as hard as I can, but more like you had said, is I've backed off, and it's not necessarily heart rate with the Hansons. It is about pacing. If this is your pace, you need to do X amount faster or X amount slower based on the run. But I've been doing those with watching my heart rate, knowing like, okay, so I'm going to be training and I'm going to be throwing a little bit of a hill in. I know if my heart rate hits, 180, 186, I need to kind of back off it a little bit. And like you're saying, I will slow my pace, but to a power hike, so to say, up some of the hills around here that when I'm running on the streets, just to keep my effort in the same. That way I'm kind of getting the best I can for the Hansons, but also trying to get a little bit of the hill work in. And this weekend, like I was going to do some trails on Sunday with a friend, As I said, my mom was visiting, so I ended up not doing the trails. I ended up going out a little bit later in the day. But I had a 10 miler, but I wore my trail shoes, went on the rail trail, and I pushed my little guy in the stroller. You know what I mean? So I did a 10 miler pushing the stroller. So it was a flat course, but I made it, I want to say, harder. So that way, come race day, either race, I'm going to say, would feel a little bit easier by comparison, not pushing the toddler in the stroller either. So
Yeah, that'll eliminate at least like a good 30 pounds, right?
yes. So, and it is, I mean, it's a nice stroller. It's a Bob, but it's a secondhand, bought it at a consignment store. It's got to be 10 years old Bob stroller. So it's an efficient machine, but it's not light, and he's not light either. So, and it's good. It goes really great on flat until you hit a headwind, and then it's like a sail pushing you backwards. So, but oh well. Good.
What's the time difference between your the Chicago Marathon and the Fire in the Mountain?
Month.
You have a month difference?
Yes.
So my recommendation in that month after your recovery from Chicago is that you spend as much time on at least similar ground that you'll be covering on Fire in the Mountain, just so that mentally and physically you're prepared for that. Because depending on where I'm training, I try and train in the most similar situation to what I'll be running in.
Yeah, as much of a avatar of the course as you can get. Assimilation is going to be better. So, and it sounds funny. I'll say it this way: the town I'm in, we're right along the river. So, I can't go real far before I hit a hill, regardless. But on my easy runs, it's almost like I run north to south along the river because it keeps a consistent pace and it's flat. And all of my tempo or my hard runs now, I run east to west because I only have to go a half a mile or less, and I'm going up a hill. And I do have some decent trails in the area because I've been hitting them a little bit, and I'm going to continue to try to hit them more and more often, like you said, on a downhill road. Like I can quickly pick up, literally my pace will go from 2 or 3 minutes faster. Downhill on a trail is going to be substantially different with roots and rocks and all of that stuff. So I am going to have to watch my footing a little bit. That's a downfall of mine. I really like to lean forward and open up my stride and try to gain everything I can on a downhill. So I know my quads, like you said, they can take it as long as I as sure-footed as I possibly can be.
Yeah, the general rule that I look at is, can I stop in about 6 steps, right? So you can see the trail at least about 6 to 8 steps in front of you.
Yeah.
So can I adjust to whatever is going to happen to me in 6 steps? If not, I need to back off the pace. The other thing that happens when you're like running downhill on trails, there's a little more bounding, right? So you're like laterally moving that you're not doing on a normal road run. So it's a little different muscle activation and stuff like that you have to be aware of.
Yeah. Got it. What's your favorite, either your favorite distance or what's a favorite ultra that you've done?
I think I have to say that the 100 mile is probably my favorite distance. As far as ultras go, the 100 mile is my favorite distance. Every one I've been to, there's a certain level, I guess, of exploration that you get to, right? Like you're going out and you're covering 100 miles in essentially a day, give or take. And there's a lot of like, you're pushing yourself to a limit, but you're not removed entirely from the experience.
Okay.
So you can you still get to enjoy everything everything that's going on around you, be aware of, oh, this is beautiful lake or this beautiful mountain, or, I'm like running through like 6 different covered bridges or whatever the case may be, depending on the scenario. And you still get a little bit of that push where you're kind of out of it for periods of time and things get really, really low and you're stripped away of like all your emotional facade, I guess. The best way to explain it is so in Vermont last year, I had a really enjoyable race. I really liked the race. It's a good course for me. It was a runner's course, and I had a great race at the Vermont 100. And I still got to mile 88, and and we were coming into the aid station, and my pacer's looking at me, and he's like, "What do you need? What do you want?" And I said, "All I want is like a hug from my wife, and like that's like literally all I want." And Megan's there, Megan Fanning's there, and she comes running up to me. She's like, "What do you need? What do you need?" I was like, "I just want my wife. I just want to give her a hug." And like I hugged my wife, and I'm like tears are like streaming down my eyes, and I'm like I just want to be done with this race. And then she's like, "Well, you got like 12 miles. You're like done."
Yeah.
She's like, "Just go and finish it." And I was like,
so simple for her. Just go do it.
but like everything was like totally stripped away. There was no like, fake machismo. There was nothing like that. It was just like I was just raw. Like all I wanted was like to be done with this thing, and that's like all I could express at that moment. And and she was. It's like that's an awesome, very cathartic feeling, I think. And so I think you get that in a 100-miler. I don't know if you get that. Maybe some people get it in a 100K. Maybe some people get it doing a marathon. But like,
maybe it's just because I'm not as tough as you, and I want to say that runners who get what you're saying, or any athlete, I should say, in any event, whether it be swimming or biking or I guess hot dog eating, whatever. Somebody, if they get what you're saying, they get it. 'Cause I completely get what you're saying, and that for me was literally about 100 yards short of. I was in the Pittsburgh Marathon, the last one I did here in May, and that's I was mentally pretty much done. I was almost obviously done with the race, but literally just I turned the corner and I saw my wife and son. Like you said, there was this just overwhelming. Just like tingle through the whole body, holding back tears, everything. I mean, that was it. I get what you're saying, and for me that was at mile 26.1 out of 26.2. So
right.
Maybe I'm just not as tough as you. You can hold off until 80 some miles. So hey.
I think a little bit of it with the 100-mile is you get so removed from everything that's comfortable in your life, right? Like you're spending 20, 30 hours in an uncomfortable state. And the next day, right? Like the next day you really appreciate like how good an apple tastes. You like really appreciate like how amazing a hot shower feels. Like all those like things that you take for granted on a daily basis, like are suddenly amplified, and that's I think where a lot of the addiction in coming to running ultras comes from.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
So
the next two questions I'm going to have for you, one of them and I'm glad Karen's interview doesn't come out till later, because I even said I don't know if you're going to give me the same piece of advice. And I hope you put it here, and if not, I'll remind you what you told me at one point. But what's one piece of advice that you would give me or any new ultra runner on their first attempt pre-race, like now leading into it, training, or even up to like 1 second before you start the race?
The biggest piece of advice that when things go bad, like don't quit, because like it changes. So like don't drop because your feet hurt. Like, because what's going to happen is your feet are going to feel okay in a half a mile, but your knee might hurt. Like my buddy jokes and he says, you're running and everything kind of hurts after 16 miles. It's how long you can endure it, and different things are going to hurt. So if your knee hurts now, don't worry about it, because in a half hour, something else is going to hurt that's going to be completely different. You'll totally forget about your knee. So you'll have a lot of lows, or at least you'll have lows, and just grind out that low, because it'll change. So that's my biggest thing is the way we, in doing 100 milers and when you're running in the dark and stuff like that, is never quit before the dawn. That was kind of always the way I felt about it. So I don't know what I told you before, but that's what the piece of advice I'm going to give you today.
Got it. Well, the next advice question, because I had a second piece here, and I think you've already answered it. We could just go back and cut it out, but I'll see if I can get you to repeat it. And that is, what's then one piece of advice you would give that same runner during the race? And I think you just said it very well with the don't quit, or don't quit for the dawn, or keep going type of deal. So, and that would that be, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you literally just said that. Is that what you would say to somebody during the race?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're dealing with something that like hurts and stuff, or whatever the case may be, is if it's not life injuring, if you're not going to be permanently damaged by this, you'll be able to move through it. And it like might be different in 10 miles down the road. It might be different in 5 miles. It might be different, it might not be different. You might just suck it up and it might stink for the remainder of the, 20, 30, however many miles you have left. But when you're done, you don't go back and there's no regret. I've seen a lot of runners that have, dropped from races, DNF from races, and then there's always like a little level of regret that exists in that. And they've dropped because, and I've seen runners, and I don't take into account anyone's pain or damage or that they've done to their body, because doing ultra marathons, you're going to damage your body. It's not like a super healthy thing to do. I mean, you damage your body doing a marathon, so like now you're going to extend that further. But it's, like I said, there's a lot of benefit to it, and to me, there's way more benefit than the negative on it. So I kind of got sidetracked. So I guess I've seen
sidetracks are good. That's where more knowledge and more stories always come from.
So I've seen people quit because they felt uncomfortable and then regret that they did later on. And I've seen it happen where they've literally regretted it 20 minutes after like turning in their bib, where they're like, I could go back out now. And you're like, you should have just like chilled out for 20 minutes and like not quit.
Yeah.
But like, you can't, once that bib's in, like the race is over, you know what I mean? So can't go back.
Right. Got it. The piece of advice that you had given me, and it was for Pittsburgh, and I was trying to scroll back through my phone. I'm not going to find it now. And actually, hold on, I might be right here with it. And I don't want to summarize it or chop it up, but it was run right here. I can't say the first part of it, but it's be brave on the first, be smart on the first half, be brave in the second half.
Yeah.
But I guess that was the best piece of advice I think anyone has given me all year regarding running and racing, because I think that summarizes a whole heck of a lot, and that's, you just don't go out too hard. You go out and be smart about it, and then I took that whole be brave in the second half is leave it all out there, like you just said. Hey, do the best you can. Like, and I joke that the first time I did the Pittsburgh Marathon, I quit that race, I don't know, maybe 15 times. I just forgot to walk off the course. There was like a mile stretch, mile 23 to 4 or something, this big, long, hot, no sun on this freeway. I'm just hating life. And, I'd run 20 steps and be like, that's it. I'm done. I quit. But I'll just, I got to walk. So I just kept walking towards the finish line. Then I'd start running again, and then I'd quit again. I did that so many times. And, I'm going to circle back around, and I don't want to, once again, say put words in your mouth or change it. I think a big part of what you were just saying is, things are gonna, and you kept saying hurt. I guess what I'm going to say is if somebody has, and I'm not a doctor, I don't think you are, you might want to fill me in on that, but if somebody, if you're injured, and John and I did a whole thing on this before, that old football, are you hurt or are you injured? If there's an injury, if it's something that's going to debilitate you and you're never going to walk again, I see no shame in getting off the course there. But if it's just discomfort, like if your foot is just sore, or if your leg is a little crampy, or if you're a little bit winded, walk it off. Try to stretch it out, walk it off, take some nutrition or some hydration, and try to just work your way through it. Is that appropriate, you feel, or no?
Yeah, no, I that is the so that's I'm going to say that's the correct answer. And like I said, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. However, I know personally for myself, and this goes back to like, I don't know, this is maybe the what I was saying about there's like some shame and injury and stuff like that. And I've definitely like hurt myself and injured myself where like it probably would have been best off overall maybe if I didn't finish the race, if I DNF'd the race. But I could still continue on. And so I've gone into races and I tell people to a certain extent that you have to be, and it's not literal, but you have to be willing to die out there a little bit. And I mean that is like, going into like my last 100 miler, I was like, all right, so if I fall and break my wrist, like I can splint my wrist up and finish this race. Like I literally had that mental conversation with myself that like, I know that like that I can finish this race. I know that like, it's not life like it's not going to change my life. Like if like my wrist is like splinted for 18, 20 miles, or maybe 6-10 hours. Mm-hmm. But it's going to hurt like hell.
Yeah.
And it's like, and there's going to be probably no level of pain that like can equate to that, but still, I would still be willing to finish that race. And I think there's some of that has to come into play. But maybe I'm just really, really sick in the head. I'm not sure.
I'm gonna just say you're tougher. You're tougher than I am. I'm not saying I wouldn't, like you said it. If I'm out in the woods and have the opportunity and I'm that close to finishing, I'm gonna say that close. It being like you're talking about a 100-mile race. If I'm that far in and it's not something, if I fell and broke my ankle, I'm pretty sure that I would be done because I'm not gonna hobble the rest of my life just to get the buckle, Right. But that being said, is like you said, the wrist. I'm not saying it's non-essential. It's gonna hurt, but you're not so much using it unless it's for water, nutrition or something. So I'd see how you're saying you can play through that pain, so to say.
Yeah, I mean, if you break something in your leg, your race is kind of done because you're at that point, like I said, you're going to do permanent damage to your body, right? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Whereas your wrist, it's just going to be an excruciating amount of pain, and like you're probably not going to do permanent damage. But I don't think most people would consider finishing a race if they fell and broke their wrist.
No, you are definitely. I'm going to put you and say tougher than most in that scenario, even just to say it up front. And I know you would follow through on the back end of that. So
I think dumber would be. But I mean, if you look at, it's interesting because I think that mentality follows through in ultra running a lot. Look at Kilian Jornet's Hard Rock finish from last year. He fell and dislocated his shoulder, I think at mile 40, and continued to finish the remaining 60 miles with his like arms essentially in a sling in his hydration pack, using his hydration pack as a sling. And Hard Rock is one of the toughest 100-milers in the U.S. So, Kilian won it too. On top of that, which is the craziest thing. So,
those are always the best stories. Not everybody went out and everybody was fine and nobody had was too hot, no heat stroke, no blisters. Everybody was just perfect. That's not a good story. So I don't know. What you're saying is pretty epic there.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I appreciate having you on and talking. We're nearing in on the hour mark. One last question that I do want to ask, and then we can wrap up here, and that's, are you going to be available early November, and do you want to come down and check out Fire on the Mountain? I mean, I know for you it's going to be, for me, like I said, 30-plus miles is going to be epic in my lifetime, and this might just, be like a training run? I mean, think you can squeeze that in?
So, unfortunately, I just looked at the dates, and I had I signed up on the wait list for Pinhoti 100 after run. So, assuming I'm healthy enough to run Pinhoti 100, it's the same weekend. If, however, Run Rabbit Run chews me up and something goes wrong and I'm not healthy enough, I would love to come down and at that point I probably won't be running, but I'd love to come down and like crew and like help out for you and do whatever you need, man.
Yeah.
Get you to the fine.
Cool. Well, in this case, I'm gonna say I hope I don't see you, because I want you to be out there, living your dream and doing epic things and continuing with it. So in 9 more months when we check in, you're gonna go on with all kind of amazingly great things that you've done. So, and maybe I can swap back with that 100 you did. I did a third of that, and I thought I was awesome. So
Dude, it all starts with that first one. It's right. Like you don't get, I tell people that you'll run into people and they're like, oh, I want to run a 100-miler. And I'm like, well, have you run anything above a marathon? I've even seen people who have never run a half marathon say like, I want to run a 100-miler. I'm like, well, you have to do like A before you can get to like Z. So like, let's get comfortable running a half marathon. Let's get comfortable running a marathon. Let's get to a 50K and then see how you like that. Because you might get to a 50K and be like, nah, marathon's where I'm at, or half marathon's where I'm at. And I'm not saying you particularly, but anyone in general trying to like do that, right? Like,
right.
And so I always think that, you got to start with step one and then like go from there. So 50K is a great race, especially if you're doing a good trail race and you're going to get some experience out of it and some like, hopefully you learn something about yourself, because that's kind of, I think, why we do most of these things.
I've never spent a day in the woods and not learned something about myself. So, whether that be hunting, fishing, hiking, whatever, you always come back with, I feel, with a little bit more clarity. So, just unplugging and getting away from, I want to say life. I don't know. That's just how I'm looking at it. So, I don't know. We'll see. Definitely be an adventure. I'm looking forward to it. I'll keep you updated, offline through it, and online I'll be talking about it if you tune into a show here or there. But for now, I just want to thank you for your time and coming on and answering some of these questions here and giving us a little bit more insight and in-depth stories and a little bit more into your life. So appreciate it. Anything else you want to throw out there to the group or to the listeners, and anything you want to say here before we cut it off?
Oh man, I just want to say thanks for having me on, and best of luck to you. And I'm looking forward to hearing how your training's going and how you're managing the marathon training and the 50K training, because they are sort of different in their training. So
up front, admitting, like I said, I feel like I'm doing the best I can, trying to serve two masters, especially since I know that they're the similar, but they're really not. And, I'm not exactly going, quote, over hard or too hard with the, like crazy trails and all of that just yet, but I think they're going to be upcoming. So the next 2 months, I'm 8 weeks out now, so the next 6 weeks is really going to be interesting to see what I can do, and part of that might be limiting as well, because I'm shifting the majority of my runs to the mornings, just because I have to, just for time constraints. Yep. And that being said, it's getting dark. It's still getting lighter later. So I'm not gonna necessarily get up at 4 a.m. to go out to run on a true trail with a headlamp. So it has been a lot more like streets or gravel trails around my house. Not as technical, but I'm gonna try to interject those once a week. And I know that'll be off on as far as my pacing for my marathon, but the whole idea of Chicago is going to be flat and no elevation is going to help me pick it up, or not running with the stroller is going to help me pick it up. So I think it's good. I don't want to say cross training, but training in a different manner or method there. So we'll see. I'll keep everyone updated, open book. And that's kind of the point of doing this, is holding myself accountable and also letting people listen along and say, or place their own bets on how well it's going to work, how poorly it's going to go. And at the end, well, only time will tell.
And feel free to hit me up with any questions, man.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to go ahead and cut this off here now. I just want to say to all the listeners and say, hey, thank you for listening along. If you have any questions, you can reach out to myself, Rob at EnduranceForEveryone.com. You can reach out to John at EnduranceForEveryone.com. If you haven't already done so, please go out, onto whatever app you're listening to this, iTunes, Stitcher, or podcast, or podcast app, or Podbean, or whatever it is, and leave us a rating and a review. Those really help other people find the show. And just want to thank Sean once again for coming on again, and say thanks from everyone here at Endurance for Everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Endurance for Everyone podcast. If you have comments or questions for the show, send an email to teamE4E at EnduranceForEveryone.com. And remember, swim calm, bike strong, and run steady.